Hey everybody, Gary Simon here, and welcome to my annual UI design crash course here for 2024. We are going to design this layout, this website layout that you see right here. I know, it's very snazzy, it's cute with kittens. So we're going to use an app called Figma for this. Now, Figma is a UI, UX design and prototyping app. They offer free accounts, so you can go to figma.com, create your free account, and you'll be able to follow along with everything in this video. Now, I have to mention this. This is a crash course. Therefore, it is not comprehensive. Even though this is kind of like a longer video, maybe an hour, I'm not sure what the final result will be. There's just so many things that I can't cover in a crash course. You're gonna walk away at the end of this, if you watch the whole thing, probably feeling a little bit dazed and confused, maybe inspired and excited to learn something new. If that is the case, then I want you to do two things. First, make sure to subscribe here because I upload videos every week about these topics. And then second, most importantly, check out DesignCourse.com because I do have an interactive, more robust UI UX design course that you can take. And it's over 16 hours of videos loaded with a ton of examples. There is a coupon code. You can take it today, take it at your own pace. And okay, that's enough spam. Let's go ahead and actually get started. All right, everybody, let us get started. So essentially, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to open up the description or the comments of this video. You might be watching us on YouTube, you might not be. Basically expand it and find the link to the resource files, and it's a link. Click it, and it's gonna take you to this page or something that looks like this page. I don't know, I may not leave that crazy character there in that thumbnail, but if you click open in Figma, now you may have to create a Figma account first, which is free, so don't worry about that. If you click, eventually you may, like I said, you may have to log in. Click on open in Figma, you're going to get this page essentially. Now, this is the Figma interface. And I want to real quickly, just kind of very quickly, I hate talking about user interfaces and theory and all that stuff. I like to be very, hands-on, which we will get to. But to just describe the user interface here real quickly, on the left, we have this left panel over here in this section. And essentially, this will serve as an area to do a few different things. Mainly, it's used for all your layers. And you'll see how that works in a little bit. And it's also used for assets like listing out components and also your pages. So if you click on home, for instance, you'll see two pages. One says assets and the other says home. So if we click on assets, you'll see these two frames as they're called right here. And these are going to be project assets we will use for this project. That's why I want you to download this. You learn much better by doing and following along rather than just watching and not doing. So physically moving your hands, pausing my video, and following along is going to help you way better, and it's going to help commit this stuff to memory a lot better. And so we'll be using this section, and so that's the left panel. Up here we just have some general tools, like this is the frame tool you use a lot. We have a bunch of size-based tools like rectangles, polygons. These are all powerful. Also the pen tool, we'll be using that. The type tool. Over here we have components, plugins, and widgets that you can search for, the hand tool, and then a comment tool. Over here, we have a right panel, and this is a couple different panels based on these two tabs here. You're gonna be working within Design tab probably for the most part. And based on what you select over here, it will modify the things that you can, the properties that you can adjust. And then over here, prototype, this is simply meaning when you wanna add interactivity to it, usually you're in this tab after you've designed stuff. You can add interactivity over here, and we will get experience with that as well. Up here, we have the option to share this and embed it. We also can play the prototype so we can interact with it, how we envision as UI UX designers this particular app or website to behave. And yeah, that's basically it. And of course, there's a lot of other things that we need to learn, but that's a high-level overview of the UI. So the first thing we're going to get started with here within Figma is going to be, we're going to click on the home page, and let me delete that because you don't see that right now, or you may not. And we want to create a frame. Now a frame is basically just a section of design. It can hold the entire layout. It can hold maybe just a component. It's basically where you design and put stuff into essentially. And so you can access by hitting F on your keyboard or just up here. Now when you do that in the property inspector on the right, you'll see that we have a some preset options. So I like to start with desktop design first. So I click on presentation because I know I have a 1920 by 1080 preset. So when I do that, we see this big white blob or box or rectangle rather right here. So first of all, why would I design desktop first? What does that even mean? Okay, I don't want to make assumptions about your skill level, so I'm going to start with the basics here. Essentially, when you're designing a website or an app, especially for websites, you will find that you need to make sure that your design, the layout that you create, the UI, works well on all devices. So on a desktop device, something like a 1920 by 1080 or larger, these are large screens that are typically viewed on a desktop monitor or like a laptop monitor. Then you have the next small size downs, you get into the different tablet sizes, and there's tons of different sizes there. And then at the smallest level, we have phones, all right? So your design needs to adapt to all these different viewports, okay? Back in the day when I started out, like in the late 90s, we only had CRT monitors, and that was it, 800 by 600 pixels or so. And it was a lot more easy. Things are more complex these days because of all the devices. So once we have, and by the way, I start with desktop first, the large design first when I'm trying to think about, try to piece together a layout, because it's a lot easier for me and most other people to start designing on the large desktops first than rather trying to start with a phone design or a mobile design first and then try to add complexity by making it larger. It's easier to take away things when you have the full desktop experience, because the desktop, you have a larger space. You can do a lot more things. You can have more columns and things seated to the left and right. Whereas a phone, you don't have that option. You really can't put too many things to the left and right of each other. Okay, so I start with desktop first. Okay, sorry, I want to be thorough as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to our assets. And the first thing I'm going to start with is the Navbar section, or the header. All right, the header is typically comprised of the branding, which is the logo design on the left typically. And then over here on the right, you have a navigation, a horizontal navigation, where you have like a home button, about us, contact services, a FAQ, frequently asked questions, etc. Sometimes you can deviate from that based on the needs, but that is the most used by the overwhelmingly most used pattern for a UI or for a navbar. So if I go to assets and I take our logo right here, it's just a very simple logo I made, called Frisky, and this is for a fictional business that sells cat food. That's the best I could come up with. Don't worry, in the future, the very near future, here in 2024, I will be working with real clients and I'll be featuring that. In fact, some local people who will come in as well. So make sure to subscribe. Now, I'm gonna copy this. So to copy this, Control C, just like everything else. We're gonna go back to the home page, Control V to paste it in. And now you get introduced to your very first lesson in UI design fundamentals. So there's several different aspects of design, especially UI UX design, that you need to be aware of. And these are just core principles and tenets of UI design. But it's also not just UI design. Many of these lend itself into all other art forms. So the first is going to be scale. Now these are in no particular order, but scale. Should a logo be this big on a desktop, like this big design? We have this big, large desktop design. Should it be this big, like up here? Absolutely not. The only time the logo should be this big is maybe if you have like a loading sequence and it's just showing the logo real big for a second, then it animates out. That's fine. But you don't want it this big. You want to have it somewhere roughly right around this size, if I were to eyeball it. Okay? There is such thing as too small, and then there's such thing as way too big, as we saw. So roughly right around here, I think that's pretty good. Now, another thing that's very important, notice how I'm not putting it against the edges or real close up here or way in here. That's also called, it's a couple different names. You can go by proximity. You can call it negative space. You can call it white space. I typically call it white space. And white space is the empty space around your elements in your design. So we have a logo design element. Here's the white space around it. So based on this current viewport size, I think having this amount of white space to the top and to the left is pretty solid. So any other important type-based elements, I want to make sure that they have a equal white space and they all start on the same column, okay? So to make sure that you can do that, there's a couple different things you can do in order to do this. So you can hit Shift R, and that gives you the horizontal and vertical rulers up here. If you left click over on top of the left one and drag it, you can just put it right there. So look at that. You can see how it's basically on that column. Now this guide right here is not a part of the design because we can toggle it off. It's just for ourselves when we're trying to align things and keep consistent alignment. Alignment is another UI design fundamental. So now that we have that, we want to make sure we have equal white space on the other side. So if I take this rectangle tool, or you can hit R on your keyboard to gain access to that via shortcut. We can left click it in the very top right and just kind of like drag out a square so that it matches. It'll snap to this little guide. Now if I hold Alt, Shift, and right click and drag this over to the other side, now I can just take another one of these guides, and now guess what? We have equal white space on the very left and right sides of our design. And we can toggle that off by hitting Shift R and just, you know, toggling it on and off whenever we need it. I don't always like having it present because it becomes a distraction in the design itself. Okay, so now that we have the logo, the next part I'm going to start with is going to be the navigation. All right, so on a large desktop like this, we want to have a horizontal navigation, meaning you're going to have a link here, 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 okay, separated by white space. So if I go back to our assets page, these little labels right here are actually the same font that we're going to use for the nav items, and it's called Enter. So if I go back to home and I hit T, or you click up here to gain access to the type tool, you just left click somewhere around there, and I'm going to type in home. All right, so when I do that, first off, let's see if you've been paying attention. Is the size of this home button good? Is it good in relation to the size of this logo, how big the logo is? Okay, so we have what's called a little bit too much visual hierarchy because this home button is scaled up way too large. If you look over here in the property inspector, size 50 for a nav items on desktop is way too big. So, you know, maybe we're gonna try size like 22. All right. Now notice if I zoom up here, notice when I move around, you see these little guides, this red lines. That's just trying to help you snap to positions that make sense, essentially. And so I like right here where the baseline of the home type matches the baseline of the logo. And I'm gonna put the home button all by itself, kind of just right there. I may not make it bold, so we can come over here and just make it regular. All right, so I'm always zooming in and out by holding Control and my mouse scroll wheel, because it's nice to be able to look at your design from, you know, the macro perspective, like from the moon, and then it's nice to get in here sometimes and really zoom up. So I'm always using my positional, you know, keys in my shortcuts here, and that's just something that will get baked into muscle memory if you decide to follow this very fun and exciting career. Okay, enough rambling. So that's our home button, and then I'm gonna have right over here a kind of like a secondary or the primary navigation. This little home button is just gonna hang out by itself. So what I'm gonna do is just take this, Shift Alt, drag it over there. And now we're gonna have another nav item, and we're gonna have a few of them, like 4 or 5. So the first one I'm gonna use is gonna be called Our Food. And I'm gonna make these bold. I'm just gonna choose to make that determination. I'm gonna make that decision here. They're all gonna be bold. There's no police that says that these all can't be bold. They can definitely be bold. And I'm gonna show you the wrong way of doing this and structuring a navigation, and then I'll show you the right way. So the wrong way would be like, okay, we have Our Food. The next link is gonna be Studies. So I'll hit Control D, and then I'll drag it over. Give ourselves a good amount, you know, decent amount of white space, like right there, and I'll say Studies. So we double click and just start typing, hit Escape, we can get out of there. And we do the next one. And when we do this, it'll tell us when we have equal white space. Right there is pretty much equal white space. And then the next link maybe can be ingredients. I think that's how you spell it. All right. So on and on we go. All right. So then let's say, for instance, you don't have to follow along with this part, by the way. Let's say, for instance, I take this and we duplicate the artboard. Don't follow along. And then what happens if I want to change one of these? Because maybe this is another page. And so your client says, let's just change this to foods or something. Well, guess what? It doesn't change down there too. And if you have a bunch of these pages already created, then you're going to run into a big problem. That's where the power of components come into play. All right. And it's one of those core tenets that you need to understand. All right. So what's really cool about components is you don't run into that issue. You make a change somewhere, it's going to make a change everywhere else in terms of the design. But you can change the text and make it custom to each page. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here real quickly. So for our food, what we want to do when we select it is, with it selected, we come up here and we click on this Create Component button. All right, click that. Oh, look, it has become purple. That's just so exciting. This is the type of stuff that excites UI designers. So I'm sorry if you're not excited. I'm just sorry. So now it is a component, and this means if I were to, and again, you don't have to follow along. If I were to duplicate this and I double clicked, or maybe I changed the color. Maybe they don't want black. Maybe they want red. Guess what? It changes red down here too. But what's really cool is maybe if this is a different page, this text has to be different. And I change the text though to like whatever. Guess what? It doesn't change this text to whatever. So it's a very powerful way. Components are a very standard thing in UI design apps. So I'm going to delete this and we're good to go up there. All right, so one important thing before we structure this for a navigation is when you're working with a navigation, you want to make sure your first component here that we created, we want to choose auto layout. And you'll see how auto layout works going forward, but for now, just click plus. Nothing's going to appear to change. However, I will demonstrate what I'm talking about and the significance of doing that here in a second. But once we do that, we can delete these, by the way. What we can then do is we can hit Control D to duplicate it, left click, hold Shift, and then now this one is ingredients, I believe. So ingredients, if I can spell. All right, and what's really cool now is we can take, now essentially these are our first two links, our nav items, and if we select them both, just left clicking around here and just selecting both, we're going to, you can see that we have, this is not really, they're both in an auto layout, but what we want to do is add another auto layout with them both selected. And now you can see right here, we have this where it says 79. Yours might say something different. That's the gap between them. So we'll be able to take these and very quickly and easily adjust the white space. So if I want a third link, we double click into it or just hit Control left click. And yeah, just double click into it that way and hit Control D. And it's going to maintain that white space between all elements inside of this auto layout essentially. And so this one, I believe, I'm going to take a look at my reference information here. Oh, is studies. So we'll go ahead and duplicate that. This will be a fact page, frequently asked questions. All right, so that's looking here pretty good, but if you hit Shift R, you want to make sure that the last link over here is at the end, just like that. And you want to make sure that this is also all in line with each other. See that little blue dash? It's all centered and lined up. Okay, great. So I want to show you another really cool thing about components. And components can have what are called component variants. And if you select a component, you'll see this little plus. And that means add variant. So if you click it, it kind of throws it off over here, crazy, you know, off to the side. And that's okay, it's not a big deal. We can just double click it and left click and just drag it outside of the artboard. And we can hit F for the frame tool and just wrap it around there. All right, so now we have two different frames, and we have one just for this component. And this component, you can see we have the initial design, and then we have what's called the variant. So let's say, for instance, on hover, like if a mouse hovers over it, since we're designing for desktop, you want it to change colors, right? So all we have to do is, let me switch back to assets. We're gonna get our, I think we'll use our primary color here. So we select it. Over in the property inspector where it says fill, we just left click once and then Control C to copy that color code. And then I'm gonna go back to our home, and then we can go ahead and double click into it to gain access to this layer where it says our food, and then just change the fill, paste that in to our color, and there we go. Now, in order to get this working correctly, we have to choose the prototype tab up here on the right. And we're gonna double click in to select our food. And you see this little blue plus sign right there when you hover over? Left click and drag that down to our food. When you do that, you see this little panel that shows up and it says on click. Do you want this to change that color on click or while hovering? There we go. So now, there's some other options we could do, like if we wanted to instantly change, that's what I would do for a simple link hover. You can also do a smart animate, and we will do this and get experience with that here in a bit. But for now, this is all we need. And we also want to take this whole container here. Notice it says for a name, it says our food. Well, what we want to do now is we want to add that our food state back, or we can just take this, duplicate it, move it back over. This will be changed to, what was it? Our food. Get a position right there. Okay. And now if we select our artboard and we hit play up here in the upper right, it's gonna load up another tab, and we're gonna hover over this, and there we go. I personally think that's probably too bright of an orange. Another thing that's very important when it comes to UI UX design is readability. And so when you have type, we actually have something called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or the WCAG, which is the acronym for it, which basically tells us minimum requirements for readable text and other important things. And so there's plugins you can get. One of the most popular ones is called Stark, like stark contrast. And it will let you know if the type that you want to use, like I'm going to type in testing right here, and we're going to give it the same color. I'm going to hit I to get this, the eyedropper tool, which will just basically give me that same color. So if we select this type, and you come out over here and you choose under plugins, let's see here, you choose Stark, or you type in Stark, you'll see this. Now I already have mine installed. You may have to, I believe there might be kind of like a thing where you have to join. It's free, but it does have a paid version. But if you click on topography, we click on this and it gives us some information. So let's go back and let's do contrast. There we go. So notice this does not contrast well enough for type like that. It needs to contrast at a 4.5 to 1 ratio at least. So what we got to do in order to fix that is just to change this color to something perhaps a little bit darker. So if I switch to the design tab, we select it, we change the color over here, get a little bit darker. Notice how it's updating. Now it says 4.2 to 1, and now it is acceptable. So if we take this color code, we can just go back up and then click on here, paste that over, and then we have our new color right there. Okay, awesome. So there's of course other things that we can do that are more advanced with components and component variants, but for now I think that's solid for what we need. Okay, So everything's lined up, and now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna create another component. And I think I'm gonna take these two elements here where it says Frisky and Home and create a very subtle divider between them. So we can use a line tool, hit L, hold Shift after left clicking to create a perfectly up and down vertical line, essentially. And we just gonna have like a very low contrast. So if we come over here where it has the black square, we click it. I'm just gonna drag up in this area in the gray section, a very low contrast separator, essentially. So if I take these three things and we choose auto layout, but also center it, notice how this is too high and it threw off our alignment. If we center it, it's gonna be much better in terms of the height. And then, although let me try this. Okay, no, we'll leave it in the center. Actually, I'm not sure if I like that because it's still not centered correctly, like the baseline of the type. So we don't have to wrap this in a auto layout actually. So what we could do is just remove that auto layout, right click, and when you do that, it groups them up. In this case, a frame where it says frame 3, we can right click and ungroup those. And then you can create another group yourself if you want. Let me get this resituated. There we go. So now if I take these three and I hit Control G, you can create a group right there. So then we can go ahead and take these elements right there and we can right click or just come up here and click the Create Component button. And now we have a Navbar component. All right, and we can also add this into an auto layout as well. And we can adjust this space here as such. So when we were to take this component, so if we did another artboard like right up here, and then put this component right there, and then just Shift Alt and drag down to copy that, so we have an instance of the component. And then maybe over here, you know, we have a different artboard that has another size to it. So for instance, maybe it's a artboard for a tablet. Then you can just very quickly modify this value here. So it's a fluid and dynamic component for your header. Okay, great. So next up, let's go ahead and keep on keeping on. In the next section of a web page, typically if it's like a landing page, like a sales page, like the first page you see when you visit a website, typically that is underneath the header that we just created, the Navbar section, is a hero section. The hero section is typically comprised of a headline, so big, large type, a few different words, maybe a sentence max. And really that in terms of visual hierarchy is one of the most important things. It's the first thing a person should see. And so visual hierarchy is a UI design fundamental. It's a principle, and there's about 7 or 8 of them. And it's one of them, and that's basically meaning it's about prioritizing your design, essentially. So visual hierarchy extends itself to all art forms. In terms of UI UX design, it's all about utilizing those other UI design fundamentals such as scale, color, contrast, alignment, white space. It's about using those to really reinforce the visual hierarchy. So you're placing priority or importance on certain elements to really just tell a story or to direct a user to where they ultimately want to go. And so the headline is one of the most important things, so it's going to be big, where you use scale to really reinforce that visual hierarchy. So you usually want to have a large headline of some sort. I'm going to take a look at my my project here just to make sure I'm following along pretty good. Yep. And so we're gonna use some catchy headline, some ad copy. It's gonna, your cat will go bonkers. Okay. So I'm gonna left click right here and just type your cat will go bonkers. Okay. So if I do that, over here we're gonna make this bold. So headlines are typically bold, not all the time though, but most of the time they are. And we're gonna make it really large. So let's try like 80. Yeah, that's big. Notice how this immediately catches the attention of your eye. That, my friends, is visual hierarchy, all right? It's big, it's bold, it's the maximum contrast, white or black on white, and therefore you're going to notice it quite well. Okay, so a common layout pattern for desktop designs is to utilize a two-column approach for your hero section. You have your type, you have your maybe a sub-headline, like a small description, and then a call to action, otherwise known as a button, might be over here. There might be 2 buttons. You might not have any buttons, and there might be a little scroll indicator. These are all calls to actions of some sort. So your cat will go bonkers. That's a solid headline. That's a good font size for this. Shift R just to get rid of those and kind of see what the design looks like so far. That's looking good. Now I want to show you something that is kind of cool. If we really want to make it extra unique, let's remove bonkers. I'm going to duplicate it. Again, Shift Alt down, just drag it down. And we're going to say bonkers. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose flatten. When you choose flatten, notice how it's outlined everything in little blue, you might not be able to see it, but it's basically outlined in blue. So if I take this and I double click, you can see these little anchor points, they're called, these little circles. I can just select maybe this one, select all of them, just left click and drag, and then we can just left click again after they've been selected on top of one of these little anchor points and move it around. So we could do something interesting with the type, just to kind of reflect, the silly nature, that the brand identity that this particular fictional business is going for. So I'm just going to move these kind of like into place, and then in the front end development stage, we could potentially utilize what's called some JavaScript to create a very cool type-based animation. But again, that's in the future. All right, so this one, your cat will go bonkers. I'm not sure if I like that too much. I did have a different one that I created in the original design. Like this one, I actually kind of like this one better. So I'm gonna grab that actually. Here, I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna use this one instead. There we go. Cat will go bonkers. Okay, now one problem though is it's slightly larger than this type, and we wanna make sure that this type matches up. So a quick fix to that in my mind would be I'm going to create a duplicate. I'm going to hit E. I'm going to right click and then flatten it. And I'm going to rotate this into size. And again, you don't have to follow along with this part. There we go. Oh, I shouldn't have flattened it. That's silly on me. Yeah, that won't work. I just have to do this. So I'll just take this. I'm gonna make it a different color for a second. No, it needs to be on top. So I'm gonna left click over here in the layers and drag it above. And then I'm gonna take the font size. And again, it's just a little bit larger than 89. So basically we're right around 92. So I could take this stuff and just make it 92 for it to properly match up. So let me see here 1 second. I'm trying to remember how yeah, your cat will go bonkers. Okay, so we're gonna drag this all the way out. And I'm also gonna take the canvas here and just drag it down. All right, right around there I think is good for the headline. All right, so next up we're gonna have a sub-headline. So I'm gonna switch over to assets and I'm gonna grab a sub-headline, which is right here. Just gonna take that, copy it, and then go back to home and paste it in. And I'm also gonna drag this roughly, I'm not sure how many, just a few lines, a text right here. And this is a size 24. And so this is good visual hierarchy between these two elements. When it comes to typography, it's important that you have good visual hierarchy between your type. So for instance, if I change this to font size like 50, it's just too big in relation to the size of this type. It's actually I'm gonna say that might be wrong. If this was bold, they would be kind of just too close together in size, especially if it was like 70. Like now they're looking almost the same, but not. You want to avoid that as much as possible. So let me just back up a few times. Control Z will get you back a bunch of steps. There we go. And then now we're going to have a call to action. So what's a call to action? Call to action, like I mentioned before, is just, it could be a simple button. It could be a form element to put in your name or your email. It could be a scroll indicator icon telling you to do something, fill out a form, whatever. And so typically most landing pages will have a button form of call to action, and that's what we're going to create. So I'm going to take our type right here. I'm just going to Shift and Alt and drag it down, and we're going to say get bonkers. Get bonkers. Okay. So, and now we need an appropriate size for the button. Let's try like size 36. And one thing, notice how this is all the way out here because we've changed it. If you want it to basically hug whatever the size of the type is, you come over here and you click this button right here, auto width. So notice now it's changed. That's kind of what you want to do with text that's going to go into something like a button. And then we're going to wrap it with a rectangle. So we hit R, wrap it, and then we drag it underneath the type where it says get bonkers and here in the layers section. All right, and now we take both of them, and you can also create an auto layout with elements that are inside of each other. So we click plus, and now it is an auto layout, and notice you want it to be in this center. So now for your call to action, especially a button-based call to action, or somebody where you're telling something to buy something or purchase something, you really want it to stand out. In terms of visual hierarchy, it's really high on the priority list essentially. So if I go back to our assets, we see we have some colors here, and we have a background color, which we haven't chose, but we're also going to use the primary color as the button background. So let's do the website background right here. So if we grab this, we can come over here and grab the color code, which is FFFBF3, and we come over to home, and we grab this top right here, this frame, and we change the fill to that background color. Hit enter, and now you can see it's just a very light beige just type of color. And then now if I go back to assets, we can grab this, go back to home. We're going to click on our button. And also pro tip, like right now we have a button which is actually, when you specify auto layout, it turns it into a frame, and we can extend this out and grab other stuff. Well, if you want to quickly change colors that might appear in multiple layers that are part of that group or whatever, or the frame, you can just under selection colors, you can make this change, and it will change it to all elements that show up in that same color, if that makes sense. Okay, now we're just going to paste that in, and there we go. Now, I like to have rounded corners. You don't always have to have rounded corners. I'm going to add some just a little bit by over here where it says 0 in this corner radius. We just left click and drag to the right, and it will increase the value. Of course, you can numerically type that in as well. Right around 5 is pretty good. Now, you can also go full on pill-shaped container by just pushing it all the way like this as well. Okay, so let's undo that. We're stick with 5. All right, so buttons are also one of those things that you want to create components and component variants out of. So if we click up here, we'll make it into a component, and then maybe we'll create a hover-based component variant for it. So if we take this and we just put it up here, and then click the plus to add a variant, we can make it change somehow. So when somebody hovers on desktop over this, we can make it change maybe the background color. So all we have to do is just double click into it, make sure we have it selected. We can see the fill down here, all the way down there. And we can just change the fill color if we want. We could add a stroke perhaps. So if we added a stroke, then on this one, this variant, click plus on the stroke. So we're way down here. And we'll increase this to like, maybe we'll try 3. And there we go. We can see the stroke. It's just like a black outline. So now, if we want to simulate that, we go to prototype. We double click in to select the first one, drag it down, choose while hovering, while hovering, and there we go. So now, we take this, change frame 4 name to, if we just double click into it, change it from frame 4 to like CTA for call to action. We can go back to assets. Let's see here, get bonkers. Just drag an instance of that component in. And then what we can do is hit play, or we're already at play. There we go. We switch to this tab that we have. And there we go. Now I think this get bonkers button is a little bit too small. So we can increase the size like this. And if we wanted to increase the call to action button size, we could do that as well. But I think right here, this is solid. Alrighty. All right, so we're making progress. Let's continue on. And let's see, where am I at? Okay. So now, when it comes to the hero section on desktop, typically, like I said, typically you see a 2-column approach, and on the right-hand side, maybe there's a photograph or an illustration or something like that. So I have one that I've picked out, and we've generated with AI actually, and that's in the assets section. So if I go over to assets, we'll see this kitten. This was generated with Midjourney AI, and I'm not going to get into how to generate these assets, but you can use these ones that are here. But if you do a channel search, I talk all about generating assets with AI. So make sure to subscribe and do that channel search if you're really interested in being able to, basically generate assets for your websites with AI. So now let's go and copy that. We're going to paste this guy or girl right into there. So now to make it a little bit more interesting, maybe we'll take an ellipse. So we'll just come up here and we're going to choose ellipse, and I'm going to basically hit Shift, Alt, left click, and drag to create a perfect circle from the center. And yeah, right around there, I'm going to hit my bracket key. So basically I want this to be at the very bottom, the last bottom frame, so it's underneath the cat. And so I could left click and drag on the left over here and do that. Or if I back up, I can use my left bracket key on the keyboard. The right one will send it to the top, whatever the select layer is, and then the left one will send the other one to the bottom. Now that's an ugly color, gray on this color right here, this background. That's another thing. Understanding color, very important. That's why you need to take my UI UX design course, and we go over this stuff in much more detail. But this is a crash course, so it is what it is. So now I want to switch to the design tab. We're going to make this white. So that's kind of cool looking. Or we could take the fill, take this little eyedropper tool, and maybe grab a color, maybe grab the background. So now it's the same color as the background, but we can take our color picker and maybe add a little bit of color by moving this to the right. Notice how now it's this little pink color, or not pink, but it's kind of like a yellowish color. And then maybe we can take it and duplicate it by holding Shift Alt and then left click and dragging up. And then what we could do, oh wait, I didn't duplicate it, sorry. Let's go over here, you can just select the layer, hit Control D to duplicate it, and then select the one beneath it where it says ellipse 1. And we'll make that larger, but we'll change the fill to white. So we kind of create this interesting little looking effect here. And maybe we'll take this one right here and move it like this. This could be as large as we want it to, really. So it's a very interesting sort of illustration. It has a lot of personality to it. Take this one, maybe make it slightly larger. I'm just having fun moving things around. And then in HTML and CSS, we can actually make this kind of like do like a little floating effect for animation. And we could also do that here in prototyping as well, which we will get to. All right, so that's our hero section essentially. It looks solid to me. Everything's looking good. And now we're going to move on to the next section. All right, so for our next section, I'm going to drag this down. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to switch to the assets. And I have a headline for this right here. So I'm going to copy that. And we're going to center this one. and I'm gonna hold Alt and left click and drag this in. And then we're gonna come over here in the property inspector and choose center. So that'll center it up. And then you also wanna make sure it's centered inside of this frame. So over here, when you select the text, you'll see these alignment tools. So we wanna align it to the center. You can also align it to the vertical center as well. So we wanna go to the horizontal center. And right around there looks pretty good to me, in my opinion. And then the next asset that we're gonna use is, let's see here, it's this crazy looking guy. Right here, there we go. So just copy that, select it, and go back to home. And we're gonna put this guy right here, but we wanna make sure he's underneath. So you take your left bracket, and we can scale it down as well, maybe right around there. And then we'll take these, we'll create kind of like a motif or a recurring theme by just taking this. Actually, we'll take both of these and just Control D to duplicate, drag it down, left bracket key to put it to the bottom, hold Shift, scale this in. Now again, this might be hard for you to do it as fast as me, which I guarantee you can't if you're new to this, but you'll eventually develop the muscle memory, so it's not a big deal. You can definitely get much better. And now what's really cool is that we can't envision it here, but on a website, when this is realized on the website, when we scroll down, we can have animations where maybe he comes up and out, and maybe these things grow or shrink or do something that's cool, you know, or relevant. We'll be able to do that with the help of CSS and perhaps JavaScript as well. But that's in the future. So now we have this section. Let me just take a real quick look at my reference design, make sure I did this kind of how I want it to. Actually, I think what would be cooler would be to take this guy, make him a little bit bigger, and align him like right here. It just makes it a little bit more like dynamic looking of a scene. Okay, there we go. So now what I want to do is one last thing, and this is going to be a cool thing. We go to assets. We're going to take these little paws, copy that. We're going to go back to home. We're going to paste this in. We're going to put this like right here. Hold Shift, Alt, left click. Put one like right there. Take these, Shift Alt. Just going to group those. Duplicate those, Control D. Just like that. Now I don't want them to go over him, so I'm going to drag the group down underneath. Oh, sorry, I have two groups here. There we go. Now they're both grouped up in one big group. And I could take this and put this underneath right there. That looks good. Now what's cool is I will be able to, with the help of the GreenSock animation platform and JavaScript, when we make this thing live, is make these little paw prints show up like one by one, like they're stepping, as we're scrolling down. So that's my idea at least. All right, so that's that section. Now for the next section, we're just going to have a 4-column testimonial section of like doctors or something like that. So to do that, if we go back to assets, I think I have like a fake testimonial, a testimonial section. Yeah, right there. So this big long one is the testimonial. We go back. I'm going to paste that in. We are going to drag this in. All right, so the goal here is we basically want to have 4 columns for 4 different testimonials. All right, so if I duplicate this real quickly, we want to make sure if I hit Shift R that the first one begins at the beginning of that column and the last one begins there as well. And then you want to make sure you have equal white space essentially between all 4 of these. So now what I could do is just delete these. We could duplicate this. Yeah. Okay. But before you do that, you want to create a component because these are recurring elements, right? They're cards essentially. So we're going to delete that. Hit Shift R to get rid of those. And now in this part of the design, we're going to specify the person's name and also their location underneath. So if I move this up just a bit and I hit the type tool, left click, we're going to say Dr. Sasharina. I just completely made that up. Make it bold. And then also we will put underneath, so Shift Alt move down, and we're gonna put just like a fake location, like Girard, Ohio. That's where I live. All right, so now we're gonna make this regular and maybe a little bit smaller, so size 20, right around there. And if we wanted to, we can move this over. We can hit O, which is the shortcut for the ellipse tool. Scale out a size right around there. And then I'm going to show you a plugin called Unsplash. All right, so you click on it. You want to click on it, and you may have to install it if you haven't, or you will. But Unsplash basically is a free image resource that you can use for photographs that are real photographs. So if I type in like person, all right, so she's very famous. UI UX designers, graphic designers know this person because this is a very common search term, and people use this person. It's not a big deal. What we want to do is select our element and then like select this person, for instance. There we go. Or select him. There we go. Actually, I want a person that has color, like a color, not like a black and white picture. Okay, so now we can get this aligned up. Notice how the top of this meets the size basically of this image. Some people will do strange things like make it too large, and then the alignment is thrown off. So alignment is so crucial when you're trying to design well. Okay. So even this stuff right here could be put into an auto layout to make it, flexible. I'm not going to, try to set everything up like at such meticulous detail. It would take too long for a crash course. But we can go ahead and take this, perhaps. Maybe we can do something interesting real quick, like a watermark. So a watermark, hit the type tool and then hit the quote, and then select outside of it and make it really large. So we could just literally take your cursor, select in there, and use your keyboard up arrow key. That's how I'm scaling it up. So we can put like this quote, kind of just like as a graphic design accent. And we can grab the background color with the color picker, and then maybe just give it a color that's very light. That's why we call it a watermark. All right, it's a very low contrast element. So now we can just take all this stuff, if you want, and make a component. All right, and then we can just duplicate that. We can add this into an auto layout. So we click plus. So then we just select on the first one and duplicate it. And there we go. So now if we hit Shift R, we'll see our guys at the end. So all we have to do is just select this. Let's see here. Oh, it doesn't look like these were actually added into the frame itself is. Sorry, I got a little bit confused there. There, we have to select the actual frame, and we want to make sure that our areas match up right there. Perfect. So you just adjust that gap size in the middle. There we go. Awesome. So now you could actually take each one of these pictures, and you can right click and go to plugins and choose Unsplash, and then you can make them unique. So if I just type in woman and we click this, it doesn't make sense to have multiple people, some of these say Unsplash Plus. That means it's just paid ones, so I'm not going to use those. So yeah, you could just make each one of these by hitting Control, left clicking on them, and then just making them unique. You can change and make each of those, these testimonials unique as well, if you wish. Okay, now we're getting pretty close here to finishing, but we still got quite a bit more. So now in the next section, we're just gonna have a section like that just lists out some features or some facts or something like that. And this time I'm gonna hit the rectangle R key on your keyboard, drag out a rectangle around that size. We're gonna go back to assets and we're gonna use our secondary color as a background. So we copy that color code over there like we've done before. Go back here, change the fill. All right. So you want to make sure that this section isn't too close. Again, this is all about white space and understanding good spacing. And again, all this stuff is covered in much more detail in my paid course, but you can always find awesome coupons. But definitely check out DesignCourse.com. Sorry for the shameless plugs. So for this section, we're going to switch back to assets and get this little kitten in a bowl of food. And we're going to go back to home and we're going to put that kitten like right over here. Maybe make it a little bit smaller. Oh yeah, look how cute that kitten is. See, this design, this layout has personality, which is fun because a lot of web designs are so cookie cutter, but we're doing some fun stuff here. Okay, so now under here with that centered, we can maybe have a 2-column, 2-row approach where we have like 4 different facts about the service. So I have that in the assets. We'll take this type right here. Actually, we can just take all those, copy them, go back to home, and oopsie, where am I at? All right, there we are. And so if I take like this one right here, and it would make sense to make these components again because they're repeating elements. And then we could do something like a little label, like hit T for type, and we'll put like fact 1, all uppercase. And then we take the font size, make it bold, but we'll make it from size 30 to size 20. And then we'll hit R for a rectangle. Put the rectangle, just drag it underneath, and we'll make the fill white and give it a little bit of border radius up top. Select both of them. Just hold shift and then select both. And then this one, we want to choose auto layout and make sure that's centered up. There we go. So we can also rotate it just to give it a little bit of personality or something. And actually the fill color, let's change that. I'm just going to grab with the color picker the background and then just make it slightly lighter, kind of like this. Not quite all 100% white. So then I could take this, shift alt, drag down, and we could change this to like fact 3, for instance. I'm just getting these lined up real quickly. One thing we'll want to do is shift R. Okay, so right around there. And you want to make sure these are all lined up where they need to be. Okay, take both of those, shift alt, left click, drag over to the right. This will be fact 2, in fact 4, so on and so forth. So just go ahead and you can modify those. Okay, and then, oh, these aren't starting on the column correctly though. So let me move these, there we go. You could probably stand to make these a little bit larger, the type, I think. So 30, that's actually a pretty good font size, so I'll leave it there. So if I take all this, like just by coming out and selecting all, and then holding shift to select deselect what I don't want, which is this background, then I can just have access to all those and maybe just move them up. And then move this up as well. I'm gonna hit shift R. And again, I think we could probably make these a little bit longer just to reduce that white space. But yeah, you would want to use auto layout as we've been doing for these sections. But again, I'm trying to make this just a little bit faster. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Underneath here, we're going to have another simple section. So for that section, let's see here. Let's take our area and just drag this down. I think we'll grab this up here. Bring it down. Maybe we'll have a 2-column section. This will be left. No, we'll use right alignment right here for this. And we're going to say, are you ready to go bonkers or something like that? So double click. Are you ready to go bonkers? All right, so I'm going to drag this in. Roughly right around there. I'm going to put it like right around here. Good white space above the section, that's been above it rather. And then I'm going to put in a call to action. And that call to action, we could take the same button. So take it, Alt, and just drag it down. We'll put it maybe here and get it centered up. So if we group these things, Control G and then hit center, we'll find the center essentially. All right, get bonkers. Maybe we'll put the logo above it real small. So if I take, just double click a few times into it and then just come down here and paste it. Yeah, we put that right there. Move this up. I actually kind of wanted this to be right there. There we go. And then finally, we can just have a footer. So we'll go ahead and take the rectangle tool. We'll create a footer. And I think we're just gonna make, let's see here. We'll take this color and then we'll just push it over here. So the color code for this is FEECCA. All right, and I'm gonna zoom out here, grab the top of that artboard and you can hit Control and then drag up. So that would be the footer background, and we could just take this, which is the Navbar component that we created, and just drag it all the way down. Now, if you don't see it, hit your right keyboard bracket, and we can just basically mirror this. I would want to change this gray color though for that separator. We get the background and just make it darker. There we go. Gray against these light colors does not look good typically. All right, so that is that section. And sometimes you can have a secondary part of your footer. So for instance, if I hit the rectangle, we could drag out, get the same color, maybe make it slightly a different color, a different shade perhaps. And then maybe you could have secondary links, your terms of service and all that stuff could go there as well. But for us, we're just gonna keep this simple, drag it up like that. And there we go. That is the full homepage design. All right, so hopefully you learned a lot there, but we're not done yet. I did want to show you just a little bit more of interactions that we can work in here. So let's say for instance, we want to have this kitten kind of move up and down very gently or something. What we can do is create a component out of it. So we come up there, click Create Component. And what we can do is we can create a component variant out of it. So if we just move it over here, maybe we'll create our own frame. And, oh, that's a rectangle, sorry. Hit the F key, there we go. All right, so if we take this and we click the plus sign up there to create the variant, it moves down. Actually, let me show you a better idea. Let me back up a few times. Control Z, just a bunch. Let's take this circle behind it. And, oh yeah, we're also gonna make sure that this is not a component either. So we have to back up before we created a component. There we go. So now they're both blue outlined. And then now I can click Create Component. We'll move it over, hit F, drag out a frame, select it, create the component variant by clicking the plus icon. And for this variant, I'll move the kitten down a little bit and then maybe this up. And that's the only change I'm going to make. Then I can take and double click into here and go to prototype, and I can drag a connection down there. And this one is going to say for the action, we're just going to put none. Or actually, sorry, I'm being slow. This is going to be after a delay, and the delay is just going to be 1 ms for 1 millisecond. You can't put 0. And when we do that, so we double click in here, let's see. We want to make sure this is up, once again, pushing down there. You want to make sure it says after delay, and we're changing it, and we want to choose Smart Animate and make it about, instead of 300 milliseconds, more like 3,500, which would be 3.5 seconds. All right, and then we select the bottom one, and we create a connection above it as well. So now this is also changed from the click to after delay of 0 ms. And now if we go ahead and we find that asset, and under assets, and let's see here, drag it in. All right, so let me close this back out. We're going to select this frame and hit play. And want to make sure that this is, let's see here, fit width, actual size. There we go. So now we can see the design. And you can see how it just has like a subtle, very simple animation. We can make it much cooler when we get into the actual code of this. So that's how you can create kind of like a looping animation. And of course, we also have our button-based hovers, and these hovers up here. And that's how you can basically work in interesting interactivity into your layout. Now, there's a lot of other things that we can do, but this has been pretty, a lot for you to take in. What you would typically do after this on a real project, once you have like the desktop down and the colors and all that stuff is solidified, you can go ahead then and create a tablet version. And then I'm not going to do the whole thing, but just to show you the process, you would take a frame and choose the tablet that you want to start with as a size. So for instance, we could do iPad Pro 12.9. You can see how much smaller in width it is compared to the desktop version. And then you would basically just recreate the design, but make adjustments to your design and your layout based on the limited space. So that means maybe on here, we don't have enough room for 2 columns. So maybe the cat has to go at the top, and then we'll have stuff underneath. Or maybe we should have the headline first and the call to action, and then underneath can be the kitten. And so that's kind of how you would do it. So you first switch to design tab, change the background, then you would take in the Navbar section and want to adjust that white space value. See if you have enough room, and you do at this point, but then you would definitely want to make other adjustments when you get smaller, like when you have a layout maybe that's more like a phone. Then you would have to change and transition into a hamburger menu, and you can create that interaction through prototyping and all this other stuff. So that's where we're going to end it right here, because it's been a long video and you've learned enough at this point, but there's obviously a million other things that you can learn if you really like this. And if so, I hope you will definitely consider subscribing, click the bell notification icon. I'm going to be doing this all year long. Every week there's new videos. And then also, very important, check out DesignCourse.com and the UI UX course with a coupon code below if you really want to get into this stuff and make a great living. Alrighty, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you all very soon. Goodbye.